Everything you've been taught about spiritual awakening is incomplete. For thousands of years, the most powerful secrets of consciousness expansion have been hidden in plain sight, scattered across ancient texts that were deliberately mistranslated or buried entirely. What if the key to transcending human limitations isn't found in meditation retreats or guru teachings, but in understanding three fundamental laws that ancient civilizations discovered and then concealed from the masses? These aren't mystical concepts, they're practical formulas for reshaping reality itself. And once you understand them, you'll realize why they were hidden in the first place. You've been searching in all the wrong places. Every spiritual teacher, every ancient wisdom tradition, every meditation technique you've encountered, they're all giving you fragments of a much larger truth. It's like trying to build a cathedral with only a handful of stones, never knowing that there's an entire quarry of knowledge waiting to be discovered. The real tragedy isn't that you haven't awakened yet. It's that you've been programmed to believe that awakening is some distant, mystical achievement reserved for the chosen few. But what if I told you that the ancients didn't see it that way at all? What if spiritual awakening was once considered as natural as breathing, as accessible as opening your eyes? Here's what they don't want you to know. The most profound spiritual texts of ancient Egypt, Tibet, and India weren't written for monks or priests. They were instruction manuals for ordinary people. The Emerald Tablet, the Vedas, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. These weren't esoteric mysteries. They were user guides for human consciousness. But somewhere along the way, a systematic suppression began. Religious institutions realized that an awakened population couldn't be controlled. Governments discovered that people who understood their true nature wouldn't bow to artificial authority. The economic system recognized that individuals who could transcend material desires wouldn't fuel endless consumption. So they fragmented the knowledge. They took these comprehensive systems of consciousness expansion and broke them into pieces, scattering them across different traditions, burying the most powerful elements entirely, and reframing what remained as either religious doctrine or New Age fantasy. The meditation you practice, it's only step 3 of a 12-step process. The breathwork you've learned, it's the kindergarten version of techniques that ancient masters used to literally reshape physical reality. The mindfulness you've been taught, it's a watered-down fragment of awareness practices that originally allowed people to perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously. This isn't an accident. This is the result of centuries of deliberate concealment. Think about it. If these ancient civilizations had access to such profound knowledge, why did their secrets disappear? Why did the mystery schools go underground? Why are the most powerful texts either lost, mistranslated, or dismissed as mythology? Because an awakened human being is the most dangerous threat to any system of control that has ever existed. When you truly understand your nature as consciousness itself, when you realize that reality is far more malleable than you've been told, when you discover that the limitations you accept are entirely self-imposed, you become ungovernable. You stop seeking external validation. You stop fearing manufactured crises. You stop believing that your happiness depends on anything outside yourself. But here's the beautiful paradox. The more they tried to hide this knowledge, the more it preserved itself. Ancient masters, knowing that suppression was inevitable, embedded these truths in symbols, stories, and seemingly innocuous practices. They created multiple backup systems, knowing that future generations would need to rediscover what was deliberately lost. The 3 laws I'm about to reveal to you aren't new discoveries. They're ancient formulas that have been hiding in the foundations of every spiritual tradition on earth. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, isn't poetic mysticism, it's the first law. The Buddhist concept of interdependence isn't philosophical theory, it's the second law. The Hindu understanding of consciousness as the ground of being isn't religious doctrine, It's the third law. These laws aren't separate teachings from different cultures. They're different ways of describing the same fundamental mechanics of reality. And once you understand how they work together, you'll realize why the ancient masters called their students children of the sun, because they were training people to become sources of light themselves. The first law was carved into emerald tablets buried beneath the Great Pyramid, whispered in Tibetan monasteries, and encoded in Vedic mantras that most Sanskrit scholars never fully understood. It's called the law of correspondence, but that name barely captures its true power. This isn't just as above, so below. It's the recognition that consciousness operates on multiple levels simultaneously. And when you align these levels, you don't just change your internal state. You literally reorganize external reality. Here's how it actually works. Every thought you think exists simultaneously in three realms. The mental plane where it originates, the astral plane where it takes energetic form, and the physical plane where it manifests as circumstance. Most people only work with the mental level, wondering why their positive thinking doesn't create lasting change. But ancient masters knew that true manifestation requires conscious alignment across all three planes. When you think a thought with genuine emotional resonance, you create an astral blueprint. When you maintain that blueprint with consistent mental focus while taking aligned physical action, the correspondence between planes becomes inevitable. This isn't belief or hope. It's applied metaphysics. The Hermetic masters didn't call it the law of attraction because they understood something modern spiritual teachings miss. You're not attracting circumstances to yourself. You're aligning yourself with the version of reality where those circumstances already exist. The second law is even more profound, though it was almost completely erased from recorded history. You'll find fragments of it in quantum physics, echoes, in Buddhist texts and mathematical proofs in sacred geometry, but nowhere will you find it stated clearly. It's the law of infinite present, and it reveals why traditional meditation techniques only scratch the surface of what's possible. Time, as you experience it, is a construction of limited consciousness. The ancient masters discovered that awareness itself exists outside the stream of time. When you access this level of consciousness, which they called the eternal now, you don't just experience the present moment. You access the entire field of potential futures and parallel presents that exist simultaneously. This is why prophetic visions were considered normal in ancient civilizations. When consciousness expands beyond the time stream, you can perceive the convergence patterns that shape future probabilities. But more importantly, from this state of awareness, you can choose which timeline to align with. The ancients didn't predict the future, they selected it. Modern meditation teaches you to observe thoughts and emotions. Ancient practices taught you to step outside the entire framework of linear experience. When you truly understand the law of infinite present, meditation becomes something entirely different. Instead of watching your mind, you learn to operate from the space of awareness that exists before thoughts arise. Instead of managing emotions, you discover the source of feeling itself. Instead of seeking peace, you recognize that you are the peace that all seeking points toward. The third law is the most dangerous one, which is why it was buried the deepest. You won't find it in any public text, though its principles underlie every genuine mystical experience in human history. It's called the law of conscious evolution, and it reveals something that would completely transform how you understand your own potential. Human consciousness isn't fixed. What you think of as your personality, your limitations, your fundamental nature, all of it is programmable. The ancient masters didn't just teach meditation and philosophy, they developed precise technologies of consciousness transformation. They discovered that awareness itself can be upgraded, expanded, and evolved through specific practices that work at the level of neural architecture and energetic structure simultaneously. This is why ancient mystery schools took decades to complete. They weren't just teaching concepts, they were facilitating actual transformation of human consciousness. Students didn't just learn about enlightenment, they underwent systematic restructuring of their entire way of perceiving and processing reality. The practices involved controlled altered states, precise breathwork patterns, geometric visualization sequences, and energy circulation techniques that most people today would consider impossible. But archaeological evidence suggests that these methods produced measurable changes in brain structure, nervous system function, and even genetic expression. Here's what this means for you. The limitations you accept as fundamental aspects of being human are actually programmable features of consciousness. The emotional reactivity you think you're stuck with, the thought patterns you believe define you, the perceptual boundaries that seem absolute, all of it can be consciously evolved. When these three laws work together, something extraordinary happens. You stop trying to fix your life from within the same level of consciousness that created your problems. Instead, you begin operating from an entirely different level of being. You don't just change your thoughts, you upgrade the consciousness that thinks them. You don't just heal your emotions, you evolve the energy system that generates them. You don't just solve your problems, you expand into a version of yourself for whom those problems simply don't exist. This is what ancient texts meant when they spoke of becoming a god, not achieving some supernatural status, but awakening to the level of consciousness that creates and directs reality rather than merely reacting to it. This is what Hermetic masters called the great work, not the completion of some external project, but the evolution of human awareness into its full potential. And here's the most important thing. This knowledge was never meant to be exclusive. The mystery schools weren't elite clubs for the spiritually gifted. They were training centers for anyone willing to undergo the necessary transformation. The only requirement was the genuine desire to transcend the illusions that keep consciousness trapped in limited patterns. But something changed. The knowledge was suppressed, fragmented, and hidden. Now you have to rediscover it, piece by piece, fighting through layers of distortion and misinformation. Unless you understand what you're really looking for, now comes the part that ancient masters considered most crucial: practical application. These aren't concepts to contemplate, they're formulas to live by. And the first step is understanding. Why most spiritual practices fail before they even begin. You've been approaching consciousness transformation backward. Instead of trying to fix your thoughts, emotions, and circumstances from within your current level of awareness, you need to establish yourself in a higher level first. Ancient masters called this securing the foundation. You can't build a skyscraper on unstable ground, and you can't create lasting transformation from an unstable state of consciousness. The foundation practice isn't meditation as you know it. It's a specific technique for anchoring your awareness in the space that exists before thoughts, emotions, and sensory experiences arise. This space isn't empty. It's the source of all experience, the pure potential from which everything emerges. Here's the technique that was hidden in Tibetan monasteries for over 1,000 years. Sit comfortably and close your eyes. Instead of focusing on your breath or trying to quiet your mind, place your attention on the awareness that is aware of your breath. Notice that there's a space of knowing that recognizes thoughts without being disturbed by them. This space doesn't come and go. It's always present, even in deep sleep. Rest your attention in this space of pure knowing. Don't try to maintain it or make it deeper. Simply recognize it and return to it whenever you notice you've drifted into thinking or feeling. This isn't concentration practice, it's recognition practice. You're learning to distinguish between the contents of consciousness and consciousness itself. Within this foundation, the three laws become practical tools rather than abstract concepts. When you apply the law of correspondence from this stable awareness, you're not just thinking positive thoughts, you're aligning the very fabric of your being with the reality you intend to experience. The transformation happens at the level of identity itself. For the law of infinite present, the foundation practice naturally dissolves the artificial boundaries of linear time. From pure awareness, past and future are revealed as mental constructs. You begin to operate from a state where all possibilities exist simultaneously, and choosing your timeline becomes as natural as choosing which path to take on a walk. The guide, law of conscious evolution, unfolds automatically when consciousness recognizes its own nature. Once you're established in the space of pure knowing, the patterns that seemed so solid and permanent begin to reveal their malleable nature. Transformation happens not through effort, but through the natural intelligence of awareness, recognizing and dissolving its own limitations. But here's what the ancient masters discovered that modern teachers rarely mention. This process doesn't happen in isolation. Consciousness evolution is contagious. When you establish yourself in this level of awareness, it creates a field that supports others in accessing the same recognition. This is why ancient communities were organized around awakened teachers. Not because people needed to worship or follow someone, but because consciousness operates through resonance. When you're in the presence of someone operating from pure awareness, your own consciousness naturally aligns with that frequency. The practical implications are staggering. You don't have to struggle for years with meditation retreats and spiritual disciplines. You don't have to fix all your psychological patterns before you can experience genuine freedom. You don't have to become worthy of awakening. You can recognize the awareness that is already awake. Start with the foundation practice. Establish yourself in the space of pure knowing for just a few minutes each day. As this recognition becomes more stable, begin applying the 3 laws from this foundation. Notice how reality responds differently when you approach it from pure awareness, rather than from the level of personal problems and desires. Remember, ancient masters didn't achieve extraordinary states. They recognized the extraordinary nature of ordinary awareness. They didn't transcend human limitations. They discovered that the limitations were never real to begin with. They didn't become enlightened. They realized that enlightenment is the natural state of consciousness when it's not obscured by false identifications. This isn't a path for the chosen few. This is the birthright of every conscious being. The only reason it seems difficult or rare is because the knowledge has been fragmented and hidden. But now you have the complete formula. The question isn't whether you can apply it. The question is whether you will. You now possess knowledge that was once reserved for the inner circles of mystery schools. The 3 laws that govern reality itself are no longer hidden from you. You understand why this wisdom was suppressed, how it was concealed, and most importantly, how to apply it in your own life. But knowledge without application is just another form of spiritual entertainment. The ancient masters made this clear. Awakening isn't an achievement. It's a choice that must be made moment by moment. You can spend years studying more teachings, collecting more techniques, and seeking more experiences. Or you can begin applying what you already know. The foundation practice is waiting for you. The 3 laws are ready to transform your reality. The only question remaining is, will you choose to remain in the prison of limited consciousness? Or will you step into the freedom that is your natural birthright? The ancients hid this knowledge not because it was too advanced for ordinary people, but because they knew it would eventually be found by those ready to use it. That time is now. You are that person. The choice is yours. What will you choose?